In the months before the release of Monster Hunter Rise, I uploaded a lot of videos hyping the game up. I made videos predicting its quality, its difficulty, and was overall just very excited. When the game released, without an ending, there were a lot of complaints. However, I urged patience for patches 2 and 3.0, because I was sure that the many criticisms of Rise would be addressed. Well, now the game has been out for a while, and it doesn't look like there will be any significant content additions in the near future. At least nothing at the level of a new monster. Monster Hunter Rise can now be considered a completed product. And given how much I've been shilling this game for the last 5 months, I feel a responsibility to also talk about all the ways in which it is lacking. The ways in which I have felt disappointed by the end product. Now I realize that I, and people like me, who are at least somewhat unhappy with Rise, are in the minority. But even so, I don't think we are a tiny minority. Take a look at this. This is a poll done by Rurikon to find out his viewers' level of satisfaction with the game. And as you can see, out of 25,000 votes, 21% voted disappointed. That's an incredible number. And it's made all the more surprising because Rurikon, as far as I can tell, is a fairly positive person with mostly good things to say about Rise. So his numbers might be biased in Rise's favor due to his audience. My point is that while I and those like me are in the minority, it's a sizable minority. And as far as I've seen, there hasn't really been any content creator who has accurately represented the criticisms I have of this game. And so I think that's the point of this video. It's an attempt to articulate what I feel are the problems with Monster Hunter Rise. Now, before we really get into it, I feel like it would be beneficial to properly frame my critique. And to do that, we need to understand the Ratatoskr rating system. In my opinion, games don't need a 1 to 10 rating system. I think that's stupid. The bottom numbers are never used, and the average score on websites like Metacritic is 70. You only really need 3 numbers. 3s are masterpieces. Games that you will look back fondly 10 years from now. If you think games are art, then you know exactly what I'm talking about. 3s are games that stand head and shoulders over their peers. The reasons differ. Sometimes the story is what makes a 3. Sometimes it's the atmosphere or the lore. Sometimes it's the gameplay. Sometimes it's nuance. Sometimes it's simplicity. Sometimes you don't really know what it is, and it feels less like a game and more like a spiritual experience. 2s, on the other hand, are just good games. Sometimes even really good games. They are games I can enjoy playing. And finally, 1s are garbage. They are games that are not worth your time, your money, or your attention. Now here's the thing. Video games are a competitive field with differential success. And so by necessity, most games are 1s. Let me put it this way. Remember the poll that I mentioned? Well, here's a tweet Rurikon posted in response to the results. In it he states, "If Rise in its current state can't satisfy you, then 90% of the games out there right now won't satisfy you either." He is completely right about that. I won't be satisfied with 90% of the games out there. But then again, why should I be? Why would I play the bottom 90% of games when I could play the top 10%? Humans are limited creatures. We have a limited amount of time and a limited amount of resources. We need to be selective in how we spend both. Most of my audience is between 25 to 34 years old, and as we get older, free time to play video games becomes more and more precious. People have jobs, they have families, and a slew of other interests competing for our attention. My point is that I want to play 3s. I don't want to play 90% of video games. I want the top 1% that is waiting for me to discover it. And I don't think I'm unique. I think Rurikon wants that top 1%, and I think so do you. The source of my criticism for Rise isn't that it's a bad game. It's a fantastic game. Its combat is the most fun I've had in the series. Kimura is my favorite village, and the music is almost as good as anything in the industry right now. I have so much praise for Rise. Its atmosphere, its freedom of movement, the charm of its characters. But it's not a 3, and that's a crime. That's the only problem with it, really. It's not a 3 for me, and I feel almost insulted by that fact, because it could be. It's so close, it's right there. 3s by their nature are rare. and it feels like one has been stolen from me for no reason. So I am going to keep complaining, because I like Monster Hunter, and I want to like it more. I'm a newer player, I started with World, but I feel kind of married to this series now. There simply isn't anything else like it, and in my opinion criticism is almost always a good thing, even when poorly worded and hostile. Criticism is a data point, and data is what companies use to make decisions. Whining, I believe, can make the world a better place. So, in that spirit, let's get started. Monster Hunter Rise is too easy. For me, this is the main problem, and the source of many of the others. It's also a really difficult topic to discuss, because it's the kind of topic that tends to accumulate the same series of replies in the comments. And I don't think it's possible to get people to listen when they have these pre-packaged, ready-made replies lurking in their heads. So, to combat this tendency, I think I'll start off by addressing those arguments that I'm expecting, the ones I see most often. And I'll start with this one. Monster Hunter Rise isn't easier, you're just better. Or a different version of it is, the hardest Monster Hunter is the first one you play. Well, this just isn't true. Well, let me give the devil his due here. It's partly true. Many of the mechanics and game knowledge can transfer from one game to another. So things like item combinations and screamer pods and dung pod usage, and even the general tempo of how hunts are supposed to go, do transfer. So yes, I am better than I was when I first started World, but how much that matters is exaggerated by these broad statements. Being more familiar with the series didn't keep me from struggling in low-rank Monster Hunter 4 Ultimate. Low-rank Gormagala was for me harder than anything in Rise. I played Rise 2nd, and 4 Ultimate 3rd, so according to the truism of it's easier because you're better now, 4 Ultimate should have been the easiest for me. Obviously, it wasn't. Rise simply is just easier than the other games in the series. Alright, next topic. You're just gatekeeping by calling for harder difficulty. No, I'm not. This has nothing to do with you. I am expressing my personal desire for more difficulty. I think it would make the game better overall. If that's enough for it to be considered gatekeeping, then that word doesn't mean anything. Moving on. This will be the last one. If you want more difficulty, play with lower tier armor and weapons. No, I don't want to do that. I don't have anything against people wanting to do challenge runs of that sort, but that isn't the kind of experience I'm interested in. A big part of the appeal of Monster Hunter comes from crafting interesting equipment and making different builds. Playing with bad weapons and unoptimized sets would mean foregoing one of the best parts of the game. I don't want that. What I want is to utilize everything the game has to offer and still have the monsters be a challenge, and the hardest monsters a significant challenge. Now, I think I've addressed all the ones that are most common. With that out of the way, let's move on to my actual point. The importance of difficulty in Monster Hunter. Most discussions in favor of high difficulty talk about the joy of overcoming a difficult obstacle after numerous failures, either by tackling it until you develop the skill, or taking a step back, rethinking your approach, and doing something differently. Both of those experiences are, of course, awesome. Definitely one of the best parts of Monster Hunter. However, difficulty also has another benefit that's harder to notice, at least until it's pointed out. And so that's what I want to focus on first. I'm talking about the sense of shared experience between players that have faced a difficult monster. To get a better idea of what I'm talking about, let me share with you an interview with Hidetaka Miyazaki, the creative director of Dark Souls. Here he asks why he doesn't put difficulty sliders in his games. I quote, "We don't want to include a difficulty selection because we want to bring everyone to the same level of discussion and at the same level of enjoyment. So we want everyone to first face the challenge and overcome it in some way that suits them as a player. We want everyone to feel that sense of accomplishment. We want everyone to feel elated and to join in that discussion on the same level. We feel if there's different difficulties, that's going to segment and fragment the user base. People will have different experiences based on that differing level of difficulty. This is something we take to heart when we design games. The main benefit of shared experience is that it cultivates a sense of solidarity between players and strengthens our cultural ties. Let me explain what I mean. When a strong monster is released, and he fucks up the community. It inspires a tidal wave of good content. It happens every time. People post themselves raging, unfortunate mess-ups, unlikely situations, impressive speedruns, animations, comedy videos, and memes. Be it some unfortunate soul stuck outside the Fatalis Gate, helpful videos showing you how to take advantage of openings, or even some commentary talking about how much they love the fight, or how much they hate the fight. Our community flourishes as a result of these moments. These moments become part of our shared cultural background. The best examples I can think of are NCH's videos on Demo Nergigante and Demo Magnamalo. Those monsters were so difficult. Beating Magnamalo in the demo demanded a lot from its players. It wasn't something you could just do. You needed to have a degree of mastery with your weapon, you needed to learn the monster's openings, because mistakes were very costly. You needed to understand and take advantage of Rise's new mechanics such as Wyvern Riding, Endemic Life, maybe even Spirit Birds. If you played with friends, you also needed to coordinate well. And if you did all of that, maybe you could kill him after 20 attempts. It was an amazing experience. And more importantly, it was an amazing shared experience. One that is now immortalized in these animation videos. My point is that without the challenging monsters, we don't get any of that. No one is going to make an 8-minute long animation on Royal Ludroth. When we lose access to brutally difficult fights, we also lose access to the invigorating effect that those fights have on our common culture. And I think that's just a tragic loss. Now, putting that aside, there are also more practical reasons why difficulty is important. I've told this story before, but I almost didn't buy Monster Hunter World. The initial PS4 demo had Anjanath as its strongest monster. That Anjanath was a joke. I'm convinced it was harder in the actual game. I killed it with several weapons and I was just not into it. My friend, who was trying to get me to buy the full game, tried to explain to me that the fun came from understanding the weapon gimmicks and learning how to use them effectively. But to me that seemed stupid. I didn't need to learn how the weapons worked. What I was doing was working just fine. I didn't feel incentivized to give a shit. Eventually the demo was re-released, with Nergigante added. My friend begged me to give it another try, and I did. As you might expect, I lost repeatedly. But the process of learning how to beat him was amazing. I was forced to engage with all the aspects of the game I was ignoring. Weapon nuances, mantle use, sleep bombing, exploiting openings, diving to avoid his big attacks. In my opinion, understanding your weapon, understanding the monster, and using every advantage to eke out a win for the first time is where Monster Hunter shines the brightest. And see, here's the thing. Monster Hunter Rise has a much higher level of monster and weapon complexity. Most monsters move faster, they are more erratic, and some have never been harder mechanically. Especially Rathalos. Rathalos' moveset is amazing. I think this is his best iteration. But the problem is, the game is so easy that it's hard to appreciate all of this fantastic complexity. I'm not joking when I talk about how much fun Rise's combat is. It really is incredible. And because of that, it's a crime that the game isn't harder. A harder game would stress the combat and as a result, highlight how good it actually is. Now, as to why exactly the game is so easy is not completely obvious to me. It's probably the interplay of a lot of things. Low monster damage, fast and plentiful healing, wirefall access, and being able to replenish your supplies at the item box. I don't know exactly. But I do know what the end result is. What you see before you is me fighting Kushala with a sword and shield. As you may have noticed, I am doing poorly, and that's no surprise. Because before recording this hunt, I had never used sword and shield in Rise. I'm getting hit very often. I'm not using my weapon effectively. I'm not exploiting the monster's weaknesses. In short, I suck. But even though I suck, even though I'm constantly getting hit, Kushala can't seem to turn those hits into a cart for the most part. And in fact, I do end up clearing this hunt. First try. Now, it wasn't pretty. I didn't have fun. I didn't learn anything. I had to replenish my potions several times, and it took like 30 minutes. But I did clear it, and that's a problem. I shouldn't be able to do that. Do you guys remember in Monster Hunter World the release of Frostfang Barioth? Frostfang Barioth came at a weird time. When it released, everybody already had super strong endgame gear. Frostfang simply wasn't balanced for that, and as a result he died very quickly and wasn't very memorable. But the thing was, There wasn't actually anything wrong with Frostfang, he just didn't deal enough damage. His moves were actually pretty interesting, and had he been released earlier, or as a part of base Iceborne, or simply done more damage, he would have been remembered more fondly today. All of Monster Hunter Rise is Frostfang Burial. He couldn't shine in that environment. None of these monsters are able to shine. I am being robbed of the experience I could have. And that's what upsets me. It doesn't have to be this way. Like Frostfang Barioth, many of the monsters in Rise have interesting move pools that are just overlooked because they don't hit hard enough. Look deep into your heart and ask yourself, do I really appreciate how awesome Bishanten is? Do I really understand how cool his moves are? And wouldn't it be fun to fight a stronger version of him? Bishanten deserves better. Aknasom deserves better. And especially Tetranadon. Tetranadon definitely deserves better. This is what I think should happen. There needs to be some kind of tempered version for all the monsters. In these tempered hunts, you can't get healing items from your camp, and tempered hunts should drop as a reward melding materials that make fighting your favorite monsters more efficient in terms of charm farming than Narwa. This would solve so many people's grievances, and at the same time it wouldn't really affect players who don't want to engage in harder difficulty. It's a win for everybody. But really, I'm not picky. The specifics aren't important. I would take anything. Capcom, please, do anything to make the game harder. You could do it through event quests. You could do whatever you wanted. The Monster Hunter development team is incredibly talented. I feel like people don't fully understand my concerns. I'm not saying there's no challenge anywhere in the game. Teostra is pretty hard, Apex and Ogre is hard, Valstrax hits all the right notes for me. It's not fair to say the whole game is a breeze, but most of the challenge is condensed at the very end, post-patches. Now on the one hand that's fine, the hardest content should be at the end, but they also should have sprinkled that challenge across the game. Let's look back at Base World. World had several minor walls all throughout the early game. Anjanath, Odogaron, Diablos, Pink Rathian, Tempered Kirin. They weren't overwhelmingly difficult, but they served their purpose. They were obstacles that incentivized you to get good, or prepare better, or at least improve your current set of armor. Rise had none of that, especially in the village. Every single one of those village quests was a joke. In the entire game, I think I upgraded my armor twice before finally farming for my endgame builds. And my concern is that this is part of a larger trend. Now I know what you're going to say. You'll say, "Oh, Ratatoskr, you deific manifestation of human excellence. You harbor such silly concerns in that unnaturally perfect head of yours. The base game is meant to be easier and appeal to newer players. The ultimate version is sure to address every single one of your concerns, and will likely contain enough challenge to satisfy even your masochistic heart." And you know what? You're probably right. That is fair enough. But there's a couple of things. G rank for Rise can't just be harder. Given how much bullshit you have access to as a hunter, the counters on every weapon, the wirefall, the immense healing. In order to craft a balanced experience, Rise's G rank would need to be significantly harder than Iceborne. And I'm starting to get worried they're not interested in making Rise that difficult at all. But even if I'm wrong, and G rank gives me even more than I hope for, there's still the problem of the next Monster Hunter game. It's the trend that worries me. I don't want Monster Hunter 6's base game to be as easy or easier than Rise. And if it is, Capcom is not getting my money. I'll still play it because it's Monster Hunter, I don't have a choice. But I'm buying it from G2A or some other way in which Capcom isn't going to get a penny. I'm not going to financially reward them for taking the series in a direction I don't want to see it go. The amount of content in Rise and its endgame incentives are a controversial topic. Its defenders point out that Rise had a large starting monster roster, even at launch. In fact, that was me. I said that in a video. I pointed out that World, even with all its post-launch monsters, did not measure up to what Rise started with. I have since changed my mind. To explain, I want to show a comment left on one of my videos. It articulates really well what a lot of us are thinking. I quote, "Thing is, you can't just look at the number of monsters to determine how much content there is. Rise does have a lot of monsters, but it's very lacking in long-term content, amount of quests and reasons to hunt the monsters. We are finally getting advanced quests, but to a lot of people it's a little bit too little too late. Releasing 1 or 2 event quests at a time doesn't last very long. The main issue is that there simply isn't a system like the investigations or proper tempered monsters that give incentives to hunt and challenge yourself. I have fond memories of challenging myself with tempered Black Diablos investigations, where I only had 30 minutes and I could only cart once. Stuff like that really goes a long way. I've played Rise about 130 hours, which is a good amount for most games, but it's not that much for a Monster Hunter game. I just find it a little sad that I am having a hard time finding anything to do in an awesome game like Monster Hunter Rise. Some of you may recognize this commenter. I've seen him a lot on my comment sections. In fact, I've seen him a lot on every Monster Hunter content creator's comment sections. He almost always has thoughtful takes, and it's obvious that he loves this series. This comment is insightful. That last statement is particularly good. I've played Rise for about 130 hours now, which is a good amount for most games, but it's not that much for a Monster Hunter game. I've often heard people say things like, if you've played a game for 40 hours, then you've gotten your money's worth. And I completely don't understand this argument. First of all, no. You don't get to decide for me what my money's worth entails. That's for me to judge. More importantly, though, my time is also valuable. In fact, it's more valuable than the money. A statement like that implies that time is some kind of undesirable thing. I don't understand the logic of that phrase. Just because something is capable of capturing your attention for a long time doesn't make it good. If you see someone addicted to meth and devoting all their time, money, and attention to it, your first thought isn't, wow, he's really gotten his money's worth. Look at how many hours he's put into it. The amount of hours in a game doesn't have anything to do with how good it is. I would pay $60 for a game that lasted 10 minutes, provided that those 10 minutes were amazing. And if anything, long games have more work cut out for them, because they have to justify to me all the time that I've spent with them. I've played Rise for 160 hours, and until new content is released, I'm pretty much done with it. For any other game, 160 hours is a long time, but that's not what I came here expecting. My expectations were born from my experience with World. My base World playtime was like 4 times as high. World's endgame loop wasn't perfect, but at least it existed. There always seemed to be some reason to keep playing. I mean, even getting to that endgame took much longer. After the end of high rank, they introduced tempereds, and that was like going into high rank all over again. Plus, there were some genuinely hard quests as breakthroughs to unlock your hunter rank. I remember that double tempered Basil quest, and that tempered Kieran quest being necessary for progression. I remember failing both of those multiple times, and then helping out randoms. That was fun. It was amazing seeing people not be ready for it and getting one-shot. There was always something to do along the way to the endgame. And then you finally do get to the endgame, and you do tempered investigations to get decorations. And because investigations are limited, you may not have a lot. I remember making group chats on a PlayStation Monster Hunter community for people to come in and put their tempered elder hunts up. Because they were tempered, and they were multiplayer and had conditions like do it in 30 minutes and only faint 1 time, they were often hard as fuck. We'd just sit there and play and laugh and lose and talk about upcoming monsters until we ran out of investigations. It was amazing. Rise doesn't have anything that gives it that level of longevity. There's no investigation modifiers to make quests interesting. There's no tempered monsters to make fights interesting. There's no endgame loop. No incentive to optimize or keep playing. It's not that hard to get a good talisman, and there's nothing to optimize for. The monsters aren't a threat. Why would I optimize? So I can kill Kushala in 3 minutes instead of 4? Go on Twitch right now, and find how many people are watching Monster Hunter Rise, and compare it to Monster Hunter World. I bet you'll find that World has more than twice as many people watching. Yeah, part of it is because World has Iceborne, but Rise has the recency advantage. It's because Rise's endgame is uninteresting and non-existent. But let's test it. Let this video stand for posterity. 5 months after Monster Hunter 6 comes out, let's compare its Twitch numbers to Monster Hunter Rise Ultimate. If I'm right, 6 will have way more. The problem boils down to the last thing Yian Garuga said. I just find it a little sad that I have a hard time finding anything to do in an awesome Monster Hunter game like Rise. This perfectly reflects my frustrations. I said I was pretty much done with Rise, but the real problem is that I'm not done. I don't feel done. I want to play more. I like the combat so much, but there's nothing in the game that's motivating me to keep playing. There's nothing to work towards, no reason to get better. In World, sometimes I would be like, well, you know, I should go hunt Tempered Odogaron solo, because I really don't understand that monster very well, and I don't want to be a burden if people post Tempered Odogaron hunts, so I would just go do that, and it was a worthwhile endeavor. I was achieving several things at once. Because it was a threat, I felt like getting better. It was tempered, so it was hard. I got decorations out of it, and I could help others more confidently in the future. What's the equivalent in Rise? There isn't any. I'm not going to cart on a Chameleos hunt. And why would I even join a Chameleos hunt? I don't need anything. I have good talismans, and most people don't need my help anyway. You know, when I started making this video, I didn't expect it to have so much praise for Monster Hunter World. I've complained a lot about World, but looking back I realize it did a lot of things right. So much so that I think I took them for granted. Anyway, I hope I've made it clear that my criticism is proportional to how much I like the game. I wouldn't say anything if Rise was terrible. It's a great game. I just think it could be better. Now, if you've made it to the end of this video, hopefully you are feeling highly offended and personally attacked. I told you guys I would alienate you. This took a lot out of me, but it'll be worth it if I can get my subscriber number into single digits. Then I can start alienating the last few individually. But until then, for whoever is left, thank you very much for watching.